Tempo training is a common training technique used by coaches and trainers.
In strength training, this is typically used to describe the pace of a resistance exercise. And if you see this written in a program, you're typically going to see a sequence of digits. And each digit will correspond to the duration of a particular phase of the exercise. So let's use a squat. In this case, the lifter would be doing a 3-second eccentric phase, so that's squatting down, a 1-second pause at the bottom, maximum effort on the concentric phase or coming back up, and then no time between repetitions. So down, pause, up, time between reps. This is what you'll typically see written in a program.
Manipulating movement tempo with external loads has been shown to influence muscle strength, power, and hypertrophy, but it's important to note that there's no standardized method of assigning these digits within the scientific evidence. Despite an abundance of studies that focus on resistance training, very few have analyzed the effects of different movement tempos during exercise. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to discuss examples of how movement tempo can influence the body's response to resistance training. Movement tempo will be affected by the amount of external load, and each phase of an exercise will be affected differently. For instance, heavy loads, defined as greater than 85% of 1 rep max, will require a near maximal effort during the concentric phase, and concentric velocity of the lift will need to be relatively slow. This makes conscious control of the concentric phase during heavy lifts more challenging. During the eccentric phase, with the same heavy load, the lifter can often consciously control the movement tempo better, even when loads exceed 100% of 1 rep max. Now let's question a long-held belief about the eccentric phase. Many people believe a slower eccentric phase allows for increased activation of motor units, thereby improving control of the barbell and ultimately increasing concentric phase performance. You should be aware evidence has demonstrated the opposite effect, and slowing down the eccentric phase has been shown to decrease 1 rep max performance. While more evidence is needed, practitioners should consider the strength loss that can occur from voluntarily lifting at slower speeds.
Another concept that we need to understand is how each one of these variables affects the other, because there is some interplay here that we should appreciate with programming. So for instance, if we're looking at time under tension, for those of you who don't know what that is, we're just looking at the sum time of the eccentric, isometric, and concentric phases of a lift. So it's essentially how long the lifter is under tension within their set, okay? So if we look at time under tension, we should be able to easily see that affecting movement tempo will not only affect time under tension, but it can also affect the number of reps that a lifter can perform. So let's say we have 5 reps we're performing in a set. If I decrease movement tempo, okay, if I decrease speed, then I'm going to increase time under tension. If I make this faster, then I'm going to decrease time under tension. But you can also see how movement tempo can affect the number of reps that a lifter can perform. If you imagine, if you're a big squatter, if I give you 135 times 15 and it's your own pace, piece of cake maybe. But if I say, okay, 135, now we're going to have a movement tempo 10 seconds down, 10 seconds up, that 15 reps is going to be really hard. So each one of these variables will affect the other, and that's really important to understand. So let's go over an example why. So let's say you're doing a hypertrophy block. Many of us would agree that if we're talking about a strength athlete, we might see a little bit more time under tension during a hypertrophy block. Maybe we're doing that by increasing the number of reps on the set. That could do it. Or maybe we're taking movement tempo and affecting that. Maybe we're decreasing speed, and then again, we're getting more time under tension. That might be more appropriate during a hypertrophy block than, let's say, several months later, maybe we're getting closer to season or our competition, and we're in a power speed block. I think we would all agree with that maybe we're going to see a little bit less time under tension with the program during a speed power block, which is specific to what we're trying to accomplish, right? Which makes sense. But then I keep seeing a lot of people that will manipulate this movement tempo, and they keep doing this 5 seconds down when they're in a power speed block, which if we look at time under tension, we would say, well, we probably wouldn't want that, so maybe it's less appropriate at that time. So if you don't understand that each one of these variables affects the other, sometimes what you're doing with small changes in a session can add up to large changes over the season that you may not want, or that may be less advantageous.
The brain's response to skills training is somewhat different than strength training, depending on how the strength training is performed. When strength training is paced with a metronome or visual tracking tool, there are some changes in neural drive that occur which may enhance the skill-based element of the exercise. In other words, the brain behaves differently when you compare self-based training to externally paced exercise using a metronome or visual tracker. If the goal of training is to directly increase strength, self-paced exercise should still likely be the priority. If a skill element needs improvement, and this change in technique may result in an improved performance, practitioners can consider using these tools to externally pace the exercise. I hope you found this information helpful. If you enjoyed, please like and share as you see fit. Thank you.